So now let's actually take a look at how we can make some mischief here inside of TouchDesigner. What we're up to is we actually want to try out a library called QR code. We're going to look at how we might make a QR code here right with Touch using some Python. I'm going to go ahead and add a new base to my network because I want to actually compartmentalize some of this goodness. I'm going to call it Wild West. I'm going to call this base QR code so I know what it is. I'm going to dive inside here and I'm going to create another base while I'm at it. We're going to use this notion of internal parameters here with Touch, which is a feature that some people love, some people hate. There's all sorts of interesting, strong feelings about internal parameters and why you might use them or not use them. I'd like to think of them as private variables. And so just like sometimes you have pieces of information in a particular code execution that you don't want your user to have access to or anyone to have access to, that's a notion I think of a private variables. It's kind of a way of ferreting away and hiding something that you want to have access to change, but you don't necessarily want to give away wholesale. How, you could do this as top level parameters. I think this is also a great opportunity to look at how internal parameters work and why we might want to use them. Okay, so we have to set up a few things for that first. I'm going to change the name of this base to ipar ext python. Now there does happen to be a shortcut way to make these internal parameters to set them up. We're going to set them up from scratch ourselves, partially because I want us to have the practice of understanding what this whole process looks like, beginning to end. After we've renamed our base, ipar ext python, let's right-click on this and let's customize our component. So there are a few things that we're going to do here. We want to make sure that we have a requirements file, and we'll I know that's a little bit foggy as to what that does exactly, but we'll see that more clearly here in just one moment. We want to have a file that indicates all of the pieces that we're going to download and use, and then we also need to know where on earth we should put all of those things that we're downloading to use. So how do we set that up? Well, we're going to start by adding a page. Whoops, I added it too fast. I'm going to add a page called external Python. We can see that page pops up here now for us. I'm going to add a Python parameter. My first parameter I'm going to add here is going to be Python requirements. And I actually want this to point to a file. So I'm going to use the file parameter type. And I think Python requirements is actually a little bit too long as a reference. So I'm just going to shorten that to pyrex. Right, this is a kind of cheat thing that you can do if you haven't played with this feature yet, is that the name of your parameter, the label of it, can be different from the actual parameter name. I think they should still live in a kind of relative namespace, something that seems sensible, but not unreasonable to shorten that for your own sanity. The next thing that we want to add is an install target, and this is going to be a folder. Let's make that a folder, add that parameter. All right, bada bing, bada boom. We got 2 of these out the gate. We can close our component editor. And now we have one other little kind of goofy thing to set up. But well, before we get there, let's let's set it up right now and make sure it's actually already ready. Let's right-click on the back of our network. Let's grab our parent parameters. And on the common page, there's a bit here that helps us actually set up our our internal parameters. So on this internal op, right, we can grab our ipar op right there, / look inside, grab the object called ipar ext python. And in fact, we're using this ipar namespace because it's consistent with the way that Touch will set this up automatically for you. And then the next thing oh, look at this, I put it in the wrong place. This goodie should actually go, cut right here at the bottom. That should go with the internal op. That's the op that I want to use. And then the shortcut for this, I'm going to use ext python. Okay? Whew. So far, so good. We're getting close. Let's set up a few things so we can see a little more clearly why we might want this. I'm going to go ahead and swap back over here to my actual folder. Now I'm going to create a new folder here called dep for dependencies. And inside of that, I'm going to also create a new folder called Python so that I have one explicitly for Python. You might end up with a whole host of dependencies on a particular project, right? You might have some Python bits, you might have some custom C++, you might have some GLSL, you might have all sorts of externals that you want to kind of keep consistently in a kind of packaged location. And this just helps ensure that we have a really explicit place that's just for Python in that whole stack of goodies. Okay, I'm going to bounce up here. And the other fun thing I'm going to set up is I'm actually going to point to a requirements file. Now, we didn't actually save our talks over here. So let's do two birds with one stone, right? I'm going to right click. I'm going to create a new folder for my base QR code. I've made a folder explicitly for this base. Let's save this component, and I'm going to dump it right here inside. Excellent. I'm going to actually point to it, make sure I've got that goodie. I'm going to turn off its save backup. I'm going to right click, save it one more time. Okay, now that's all set and ready to go. Wonderful. And then I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to create a text stat. I know this seems like an awful lot of fussy work. I promise it's going to pay off here in not too long. Let's change the name of this to be text requirements. Requirements. I think we spelled that right. I hope so. Let's make sure. Aha. Requirements. Okay. Let's right click, save the contents of this file. I'm going to put it right here next to where my talks happens to be. I'm going to make sure this is actually a text file. And I'm going to get rid of this text prepend at the front. Now, if I look back over here in my actual directory structure, I should see there's my talks, there's my requirements file. Why would I do that? Well, again, I'm trying to think about how can I make this as maximally portable as possible. I want to know that I can zip up this base and it has all the goodies that it needs for someone else to get the same results that I'm making. That's like, at the end of the day, I want something that I can share with someone that's kind of flexible and reasonable in a way that's not going to be too fussy or weird or frustrating or you name it. Okay. On this requirements file, I'm going to go ahead and use a nice new feature, or I'm going to point to that text file. I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to turn on sync to file. And the reason I'm going to use sync to file here is because we're going to do a lot of work kind of natively in our text editors when we work with Python, and not having to play the game where you kind of like open a temp file, save it, close a temp file, move things around, and do all that kind of shenanigan. It's going to be helpful in the long run. If you're using a version control system, this also helps ensure that you've got a proper way to diff your files, because they don't live just inside of those bases, or toxes rather. They actually live in diffable files. Okay, so to edit this, I am now going to actually fire up my text editor. I happen to have this open already. On the left-hand side, I'm using VS Code. You can use whatever works best for you. On the left-hand side, I can see the same directory structure, right, that is actually in my folders, right? So if we went up one, we'd see the same folders as live over here. I'm going to look in external Python. I'm going to look in my base QR code. There's my requirements. The library that we're going to work with today is called QR code. And we can put in square brackets pill for this library, not for all libraries, but for this particular library. This indicates that we also want the dependency pillow to come along with this. I should be able to save that here and back over in TouchDesigner. Oh my goodness, lo and behold, it's updated for us already. Oh my goodness gracious, that is really more wonderful than we could probably ever even admit to. even if we didn't want to. Anyway, so we got this goodness. Let's go ahead, let's do one more of these. Let's add another text dat, and I'm going to call this text template. This is going to become our template text for how we work with some of these goodies. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to save the contents of this in base QR code, text template. I'm going to leave this as a .py file because this in fact is going to be a bunch of Python. I'm going to point to that. Please grab that goober. Let's open it up. It's empty. Swell. Okay, well, we've done a bunch of things here, but if we think back, well, we made all these goobers over here. Why did we make those? Well, let's take a quick moment to actually investigate what these bits might be for. So this Python requirements file, I actually want to point to this TextDat, or not this TextDat, but rather the file that this TextDat is referring to. So I'm going to hit that plus button. I'm going to go ahead and grab that requirements text. Excellent. There it shows up. Where do I want to install everything? I want to install everything in dependencies in Python. Let's select that folder. Okay, great. So why do these internal parameters matter? Why would I care about this? Well, let's use an eval dat to see what this is all about. Because with an eval dat, we can actually see a nice quick way to be able to get to see why that might be useful. So my expression, right? I could do the operator ipar ext python .par.pyrex. Okay, that gets me that goodie right there. Okay, great, wonderful. Our internal parameters means that I can use ipar, so it's the internal parameters for this entire base, .ext python, which is a call out to the shortcut name here, right? This goober, ext python. So ipar.ext python.pyrex, the same name that we had here for our parameter, and it evaluates to that exact same thing. You can say, well, that's great, sure, but like, why does that matter? Well, that happens to matter because let's say that we have this game, right? We have a base, inside a base. Inside a base, you have some very complicated thing, and we're now like 3 layers deep. And I don't, right? So then we've played this game before, most of us. Okay, so up 1, up 2, up 3, and then the thing was called ipar ext python .par .pyrex. Okay, that got me there. But what if I just realized that this actually needs to be one. Oh no, what do we do? I realized that this whole thing needs to be 1 layer deeper. Okay, now it's in here, and oh, it's broken, right? Because now I actually need to go up 1 more. Okay, well that's silly. That's a fragile, brittle system that's going to break really easily. But ipar, right? My internal parameters for ext python pyrex, okay, that will evaluate no matter how much this thing changes, right? Now I have got a single way to be able to grab that parameter no matter how many layers away it is from me. That doesn't happen to help us in our example, but that's one of the interesting pieces about internal parameters and how we might think of them as kind of private variables that we can get a hold of. There's some other really cool things about them that we're not going to fight with. But that's like a little sneak peek at what that might be good for and why you might want to care about it.